What is happening, everyone? Danny Feng here, and I've been using the Sony A7 IV for a little over a year now. And so in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts about this camera, kind of weigh out the pros and cons, and hopefully by the end of the video, you can kind of get an idea whether this camera is for you or not. So let's get into the video. So like I said, a little over a year ago is when I actually decided to jump on the Sony system, the Sony camera line. Actually, I've never really looked into the Sony system in my life, I've always been like a Canon / Panasonic kind of person. And over the years, I've just been seeing so many people shooting on Sony cameras, and the results that's been coming out of this camera is just incredible, And so a little over a year ago, I started doing a little bit of research and try to find a camera that really fits the way I shoot and the kind of work that I do. And in the end, basically, it came down to the Sony A7 IV. If it wasn't for this camera, I think I would have got the A7 III, but the A7 IV literally had everything that I ever wanted in one small camera. So this is why I decided to invest in this camera. And since then, I think it has been such an amazing investment. I think at some point I might get two of this, or either this and like, I don't know, an FX30 or something like that. But this camera is a fabulous camera as an A cam. So just to give you a little bit more context, I'm a filmmaker based in Germany. I run a production house here in Berlin, and the main focus in my business is social media and branded content productions for clients. So as you can see, because I focus on that kind of productions, a camera like the Sony A7 IV makes a lot of sense for me. So yeah, let's get into the good stuff first, and then we'll talk about the bad stuff after, which there's not really a lot of bad stuff, but regardless, we're going to cover all that in this video. So the good stuff first. Number one, I think it goes without saying, the image quality that you get out of the A7 IV is incredible. It's super clean, the colors are amazing, the image quality and the texture that you get from a Sony camera, it's just incredible. And for me, because I'm shooting in a space of social media and branded content, the turnovers are usually quite quick. So having a camera that I could play back very smoothly on my computer and also be able to color grade it and get really decent colors out of the images, that's of course super important to me, and this camera definitely delivers on that end. I personally shoot on S-Log3 Cine, and I've built my own editing and color grading workflow, so everything's really quick when I work on this camera. Okay, the second thing on the list. So this A7 IV, because it's a hybrid camera, it means you can shoot photos and you can shoot videos, and both photos and videos are incredible out of this camera. Being in the space of producing social media content for clients, having both options at the best quality possible, of course, is something that was on top of my list. Okay, number three on the list, and this to me is like, it feels like luxury to have this, and this is the autofocus on the Sony system. So before the Sony system, personally, I feel like Canon was probably the only camera that produced really high quality, reliable autofocus systems out there. There's other companies out there that have autofocus, but at least back then I felt like Canon was the only camera that really had just really accurate and smooth and natural autofocus system, and it was just reliable. And now we get the same thing in the Sony system as well. So the A7 IV has incredible autofocus, and that is such a luxury, because I remember I used to shoot on the GH5 and the GH4, and if you've never shot on those cameras before, the autofocus just doesn't exist. Like it's so bad. I remember I had to pull focus like this when I used to make YouTube videos. In fact, one of the biggest reasons that I hated shooting YouTube videos for myself, a couple of years back, is because of the autofocus thing. I didn't feel like I could just be free and kind of just vlog and shoot these kind of things and move back and forth without me being out of focus. I actually made a whole rant about the whole autofocus fail on the GH5 years ago, but now having it on the Sony A7 IV, it's just amazing, because now I can just really focus on composition and focus on lighting and all these kind of stuff, and I don't really have to worry too much about if my subject is in focus, especially stuff like this, like talking head stuff. However I move, it's eye tracking me, so whatever it is that I do, I'm always in focus. So this is amazing. So yeah, this is such a luxury, and yeah, having that on the A7 IV is just like wow. So number four on the list, and this just has to do with resolution, frame rates, and all that good stuff. So for me, before investing in the camera, it had to be able to shoot two kinds of settings, which is 24 or 25 FPS at 4K 422 10-bit, which this camera has, and also the same thing for 60 frames per second. It does have a little bit of a crop when you shoot 60 frames 4K 422 10-bit, but to me that has never been a problem. So I don't really care. And other than that, this camera offers a bunch of other settings. You can shoot 100 frames, 120 frames, I think 200 frames per second, I think. To me, those, I really don't care. Those are just kind of nice to have, but this camera does cover the two most important settings for me. So I actually have it in custom 1 and 2, and I can just toggle between 24/25 frames per second, 4K 10-bit, 4:2, and 60 frames as well. So number 5 on the list is how clean the images are on the A7 IV. Of course, for photos, it's super nice. You can shoot raw, the images look clean and stuff. But for video, oh my goodness. So this camera actually is a dual base ISO camera. So the lower base ISO is 800 and the higher base ISO is 3200. You really need to be in a really bad lighting situation for noise to actually start appearing. So yeah, having really clean images is such a plus for me. Sometimes when I'm running and gunning, I don't have time to set up lights and stuff, so I rely on natural light. So having this camera being really sensitive to light and also produce really clean images that I could manipulate later in post, that is such a luxury for me. Okay, number 6 on the list. So as you may know at this point, the Sony A7 IV is a full frame camera, but you do have the ability to switch between full frame and Super 35. And that's really cool because if you do have your favorite Super 35 lenses, you can put that onto your Sony A7 IV and you can just switch to the Super 35 mode and boom, you're in business. So sometimes I would be switching between full frame and Super 35 mode in cases where I really just want to have that extra reach, that extra zoom to get closer to a subject. So having this feature is actually super useful. In fact, I have a button assigned right next to my record button that I can switch between full frame mode and Super 35. So number 7 on the list, and this to me is actually very important, and I feel like all cameras out there should implement this, which is dual SD card slots. So if a camera doesn't have dual SD card slots, that is a huge red flag for me, and I'll tell you why in a second. Now by default, if you put 2 SD cards into your camera, what happens is, you record in one card and then, it's getting kind of full. And then when card A runs out, it just automatically records into card B. That's amazing, right? So you can have continuous recording without any interruption. That feature alone is amazing, but how I personally use it is I record simultaneously to 2 cards at the same time. Now, why is this important? Most of the time when you're recording, it is most likely that there is not gonna be any problems at all, but there is always that off chance that the thing that you're recording gets corrupted. And that is why I feel like it is super, super important to be recording simultaneously to 2 cards. So in case one gets corrupted, at least you have the other one as a backup. Now thankfully this situation has never happened to me, though I have read horror stories online, and this is why I always record to 2 cards at the same time, especially when you're working with clients, paid clients. You don't want to one day, go on set, you're recording, and then, the next day you tell your client like, oh, by the way, the take that you really want is corrupted and we can't do anything about it. And that is super unprofessional. And to me personally, I feel like it's just bad business practice. So yes, dual SSD card, super, super important for me personally, and this camera does have it, and that is just another reason why I love this camera. Okay, number 8, which is my last point for the good stuff about this camera. And this is just more of a general thing. So I am a minimalistic person by nature, so I don't like to have camera rigs that are just super complicated with cables and everything is bulky, So having a camera sized like the Sony A7 IV is perfect for me because I could put it in a bag. It's very, very easy and quick to set up. The startup time is really quick as well. I don't know, less than a second, it's booted up and it's ready to go. Some cameras take time to, load up. As I said, like the form factor is perfect for me as well because I just like to pack light, try to not over complicate things when I'm shooting. I love tech, I love camera gear and stuff, but when it comes to actually filming and producing things for clients, actually gear is the last thing on my head. I kind of just want to be creating the thing that I'm creating and actually be solving the client's problem rather than, troubleshooting equipments and, trying to figure out how this gear works and all that kind of stuff. So I guess this is more just like a personal preference when it comes to the design of a camera, really simple, compact, and that's just how I like it. So we've covered all the good stuff about this camera. So what are the bad stuff about this camera? Well, honestly speaking, there's not too much. There are 3 that come in mind, and so we're gonna go through it right now. Okay, so number 1. Rarely this happens, but this camera does overheat, so that's something you need to bear in mind. If you're shooting 24, 25 FPS, either 4K, 422, 10-bit, or 1080 on whatsoever, camera doesn't overheat. Never had an issue with that. But if you start shooting higher FPS, so what I like to shoot is 60 frames per second, 4K, 10-bit 422. If you shoot that frame rate for a long period of time, you do start to get the little overheating signal. And if you don't address it, immediately, the camera will shut down. And it will take maybe a minute or two for the camera to cool down, and then you have to reboot it again. The whole rebooting situation, that has happened to me once, and that really freaked me out. So I think since I got this camera, I think the little overheating warning came up maybe 3 times. So the first time it came up, camera shut down, and took about 2 minutes for it to cool down, and I had to reboot it. The other 2 times, when I saw it, I just closed the camera and then just turned it back up again, and then, everything was okay. But that really just happens when you shoot high frame rate stuff. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, if you're shooting 24 or 25 FPS for a long period of time, the camera doesn't overheat, at least in my experience so far. Okay, number 2 on the list, which is battery life. So it is notoriously known that Sony cameras battery life is not that great. So I usually have 3 batteries on me, and those circulate throughout the day when I'm shooting. It never really impeded with any of my shoots, but it is something to keep in mind that, Sony cameras just don't have great battery life. Okay, and the third thing on the list, I'm not sure if this is a Sony issue or whatsoever. If I'm shooting with an external monitor, when I press record on the Sony camera, it doesn't really indicate on my external monitor. So for example, if you see over here, I don't know if I'm rolling right now. If I'm just looking at this monitor, I have to look at the screen on the camera. I usually have like a little record, dot, and also the red square thing to let me know that I'm actually rolling. But it doesn't show it over here, which is a little bit annoying. I wish there was a way to do that. I know you can literally just make a mirror effect where I can see that over here, but the problem is I will see all the settings and stuff like that, which I don't really want. I just want like a clean feed. So yeah, it is a little bit annoying, but yeah, if you're one of those people that use external monitors, just keep this note in mind. So that's my thoughts about the Sony A7 IV. I mean, there are obviously more pros than cons about this camera, and that is why I invested into this camera. It really does check off a lot of things for me, and this is why I find this camera so appealing for the kind of work that I do. So if you are a content creator, a person who shoots social media, for example, or documentaries, for example, something that is very much run and gun, this camera is perfect for you. I feel like it really offers everything in one small package. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. I really hope that you found this video helpful. Of course, if you have any questions, just drop it in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if you like this video and subscribe if you haven't, because it does help my channel. And I'll see you all in the next video. And until then, keep on creating, keep on inspiring.